All right, I'm way more frenetic than both of the earlier two, so we'll see how this goes. My name is Trent Hergenrader. I'm from the Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm going to be talking about this project called Steampunk Rochester. It's 3 different courses that takes place over 1 academic year. The basic idea is that we're creating an alternate history of Rochester that's set in the early 1920s. The late 19th century, early 20th century in Rochester is a really interesting time. We've got figures like Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, Georgia Eastman. We've got social issues of immigration, suffragist movement, prohibition, labor demonstrations, spiritualism, World War I, progressive politics, and more. The first course is Imagining Rochester, which is taught by my colleague Jessica Lieberman. It's a course in visual culture, and she looks at the city as a text. They go on field trips, they explore the history of the city, and they identify significant cultural and historical locations. My class is Game-Based Fiction. It is an advanced fiction class. It blends aspects of world building and role-playing games, where I bring in the genre of steampunk. We build the parts of the world, we build out characters, and then the students explore the world through their role-playing game sessions as characters. The third course is Research Studio, which is taught by Professor Steve Jacobs in Interactive Games and Media. This course takes place in the spring. It is a project-based course where students break up a project into teams, and then they're supposed to build stuff. They're supposed to have a shippable product by the end of this semester. So the concept here is that visual culture is going to be doing historical stuff. Game-based fiction does steampunk and world building. Together we populate a wiki with people, places, and things that becomes a repository from which the students in the game design studio draw from. Our agenda here is that we're trying to make a working prototype of a game. Originally, we thought this was going to be like an online narrative like Fallen London, but now we're leaning towards an augmented reality and interactive fiction. In Imagining Rochester, in year 1, they went to sites of union demonstrations, women's rights marches. They went to the old campus of the Mechanics Institute, which is where RIT came from. And we pinned these locations to a map of 1915 Rochester. There's no highway going through here. The Erie Canal goes straight through the center of town. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now I'm at that slide. Sorry, I got it screwed up here. So there's no highway cutting through the city. The Erie Canal still goes through the center of town. The white icons here are locations that are actually historical locations. The dark ones are fictional locations. And this gives us a shape of the city in the 20th century. In my game-based fiction course, we created catalogs of people, places, and things. Mostly are fictional. Some are quasi-historical. Some are purely historical. We try to consider the era from multiple perspectives of race, class, and gender, and try and role-play to simulate daily interactions that these characters would have experienced in this world. The 2 courses combined to write hundreds of wiki entries, so many that we kind of had to identify the most notable ones, the ones that were done the best. We've got over 60 entries, and we're only to the letter C here on the bottom. And then this is the material from which students had to draw from when they were doing their role-playing game campaigns. For the Research Studio in spring, several students from my fiction class took this Research Studio. This was both a blessing and a curse because they knew a lot about it, but they also had a sense of ownership in which they really they resisted changes, their suggestions that other students had made. So they made a point-and-click adventure game. One of the big problems that we noted right away is that the on-ramp to Steampunk Rochester was way too long for them to do that and create a game over 15 weeks to get working with decent art and other design aspects. Year 2, we brought the visual culture and the fiction course way closer together. We worked together for 7 weeks, focused much more on specific progressive politics and the Rochester subway system, and we had more concise wiki entries and less sprawl, which overall was good. When we had the Research Studio in the spring, there were very few programmers. There were more UI designers. They researched storytelling platforms, and again, even though we shortened that ramp to getting on to Steampunk Rochester, it was still too long, but the research did point us to ARGs, which is where we're moving to now. We want to use Twine this year. It was much more utilitarian. Wait a minute. Yeah, our visual culture students are concentrating only on locations. The game-based fiction students are only focusing on story structure, procedural narrative, branching narrative, and we're using Twine, where each one of these boxes is a narrative choice. These are going to be mapped onto individual city locations, so we can do a walking tour where the choices are going to lead you through different locations in the city. So the Research Studio is going to be giving 4 or 5 branching narratives. The only way that they are going to learn about Steampunk Rochester is by reading these stories. They're going to use Eris or some other locative narrative software to pin these choices to downtown locations. The idea is that these stories will be shown from different perspectives. We may have one character who is a high society member, one character who is an immigrant street urchin. Your phone buzzes, you pull it up, you'll get a little interactive narrative that'll tell you to walk 2 blocks east if you want to do this, walk 3 blocks west if you want to do this, and it will take you through important locations in the city. So at the end here, what we want to do, if this works, is approach either the Rochester Jazz Fest or other cultural or corporate sponsors to fund artwork and development, and who knows, ideally we could package it so we could steampunk your city within a few years. All right, thank you very much.